Hello, and welcome to With Legal and Business Insights. I'm your host, Joe Morales. This is our first episode of the Withers podcast series, and we hope it's the first of many episodes that will deliver insight on an array of topics, both legal and non-legal. The vision for the series is to provide a platform for attorneys, as well as non-attorneys, to discuss interesting legal and business issues. This episode features a recent conversation with my colleague Michael Rueda, the head of the firm's U.S. sports practice, about youth soccer player development in the U.S., and our next episode will focus on inbound real estate investment considerations. So the topics and content of the series will be diverse. The tone of our podcast is conversational by design. I want you, the listener, to feel like you're part of the discussion, like you're at the table with us, sitting in on a conversation, rather than being talked at. In the show notes, you'll find an email link that you can use to provide feedback on this episode, or any other episode for that matter. Before we go too much further, let me get lawyerly here for just a minute. I suppose the pro of being a lawyer is that I can write and deliver my own legal disclaimer. I have to mention that we're not providing any legal advice via this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is for informational purposes only, and I'll say it again, does not constitute legal or other advice. You shouldn't rely on this content, and we don't accept any liability to any person who, despite what I just said, relies on this content. Legal provisions change frequently, and any commentary in this program should be reconfirmed before any action is taken. This podcast material is not intended to be used and cannot be used by anyone for the purpose of avoiding federal tax penalties that may be imposed on any taxpayer. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the podcast, but talk to your lawyer for actual legal advice. If you're interested in connecting with me or today's guest, you'll find helpful links in the show notes. We've also provided a link to the firm's website. We'll start today's discussion shortly, but given this is the first episode of the series, let me provide a bit of background on our firm and me. Since 1896, yes, we're talking 19th century, Withers attorneys have been trusted advisors to successful people and businesses with complex legal needs. With offices in London, New York, San Francisco, Hong Kong, and Geneva, among many others, we deliver seamless international services around the world, providing personalized assistance to our clients worldwide while combining local knowledge and international weight to understand the global dimensions of our clients' requests. That's the firm in a nutshell, and you can find out more about our team and practice areas, as well as the firm in general, by visiting our website at withersworldwide.com. As for me, I'm a partner in the firm's business division, and I've been with Withers since September 2010 when I started in our firm's New Haven, Connecticut office. I moved to the firm's Greenwich office in October 2011, and I currently split time between Greenwich and our office in New York City. As they say, need to go where the clients are. I usually describe my practice as a general corporate practice because I advise clients on various kinds of corporate and commercial matters, from entity formations to mergers and acquisitions, employment issues to commercial real estate work, and financings to private securities transactions. I've had a fairly diverse experience so far in my... This episode features Michael Rueda, head of the firm's U.S. sports practice. Michael joined Withers in 2015 and is based in our Greenwich, Connecticut office, though he spends time in New York too. In addition to leading our U.S. sports practice, Michael maintains a general corporate practice, and among other things, he's represented both private and public companies, venture funds, and advised clients in connection with finance and securities law matters, mergers and acquisitions, and general corporate and commercial matters. Michael authored an article on the current landscape of U.S. youth soccer, and in his article, he offers insight on the path that some youth players are taking or considering taking to reach professional ranks here in the U.S. and abroad. The title of the article is Newest Peer Pressure in American Soccer, Going Pro at 16, and you can find it published in an early December 2017 edition of Street & Smith's Sports Business Journal. We've included a link to the article in this episode's show notes. Michael was kind enough to spend some otherwise billable time talking about the firm's sports practice and some of the issues discussed in his article. The first part of our conversation focuses on our firm's U.S. sports practice and the U.S. sports practice more generally. And then we talk a little bit about some of the issues that he sees as players and parents attempt to reach professional ranks. So here's the first part of the interview. Give me the 30-second sort of what you do in a nutshell.
All right. In our sports practice, we advise players, their representatives like agents. We work with teams, owners, sports properties, sports brands. We act as their outside counsel. So if you're a player signing a deal with Nike, for example, we'll advise you and your agent. If you're signing with a new team, we do that work too. I think a lot of, in today's culture, especially in the U.S., a lot of players rely on their agents for all these different types of transactions, and there's some great agents out there, but As sports evolve and become more of a business, I think being well equipped with lawyers like us to help you through these deals is good advice. So we do that on a variety of different fronts. We do that internationally, which is even more important.
All right, so when it comes to players who, have come up through the development program system, but are excellent players and really have legitimate opportunities internationally, what have you seen in terms of players who have maybe already signed contracts and are pro players here in the U.S. and maybe ones that have not, but they're good enough that they're getting looks from international teams?
Most of the kids that get the opportunity to play abroad at bigger clubs and move before have been able to get to a bigger club in Europe before they're 18. We're part of our U.S. national team program for the most part, I think. And those are special situations. FIFA has some very strict guidelines that relate to the transfer of minors. So if you're under 18, transferring from one country to an international club, right? There have been cases where kids have uprooted their entire families, and FIFA has ruled that they did it in violation of of FIFA's rules, and the families have had to pull the kid out of the program, and they've been at top programs. And there are other cases like Pulisic, and there's another kid that we've worked with before, CJ Dos Santos, who've done it at the under 18, and they've been able to get there properly and are obviously doing well with their own clubs.
When you say properly, what does that mean? That means we can't. I'm going to take a guess here. They don't want people uprooting families and lives simply to go play soccer. Does there need to be some kind of other legitimate reason?
Yeah, there are certain exceptions. So the general rule is if you're playing for a club, whether it's a youth club, you're signed to play for a club with your home federation, you can't just transfer. That club can't just transfer you to to Manchester United if you're under the age of 18. There's some exceptions, like if your family lives within a number of miles from the facility that the club operates within. If you have like an EU passport, I think. There's some, and that might even be too broad. It might be even more specific than that. But there's some very limited exceptions.
Okay.
And in some cases, some kids have actually moved, and I think FIFA found that the sole purpose of your move was to do this. What FIFA wants to prevent is like big clubs buying some kid from some really poor country,
right,
and then the kid not working out and just cutting him loose and leaving this kid high and dry in a new country.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
So if you navigate the rules properly, it can be done, right? Whether you can meet those exceptions are, in my opinion, is extremely difficult. So they're unique, very unique circumstances, right? So it's a bit risky. Kids have been able to do that, but even for pro players that do it, when they're moving internationally and they're American players, and they're relying typically on just their American agent's advice, they may get a local attorney to help them. But in a lot of cases, they're doing it. Agents operate. They're great. There's some great agents out there, and they know the business. But there are some nuances to signing contracts internationally, and when we do deals for very large, like very significant players who have enough leverage to demand a lot of different things, we still have things that we're concerned about, and things that we need to look out for. And I'm under the impression that the guys that move with solely on their American agent's advice aren't really on the lookout for the same sorts of things. And I've seen situations where you've got guys making decisions, making moves, while they're still in contract, that can be very detrimental to them financially. Clubs here can take recourse. FIFA can, there could be you can sue through FIFA or bring an action through FIFA that could really, have an impact on the player, on the club that signs them, that maybe tried to lure them improperly. I mean, these things can work out not in your favor, and if you're relying on somebody that doesn't understand the legal recourse available to clubs, or the issues to identify when you're signing in a particular country, like for some of the youth players that I know have transferred been able to transfer to a club In Europe, they've signed for contracts that have termination clauses. They operate like a break fee, like we'd see in like a business deal.
Right.
Like if the kid wants to get out of the contract before the termination date, we've seen kids sign deals with a break fee that's essentially 5 times the market rate for someone his age. There was a kid that, we're talking tens of millions of dollars. So this kid's never getting out of this contract early until somebody agrees to pay that fee, which is just crazy to me.
Right.
We'd never let him do that.
Right. So it would be the acquiring club
would have to would pay that.
Yeah, I mean, because
but even if the kid was stuck at this club, he's not getting the training he likes. He's not playing enough with the teams that he should be playing with. Therefore, he's not getting enough exposure.
Right.
He's not being developed properly. I mean, he's never going to be able to get out of this contract unless they decide to just release him. So that's one particular issue. But contracts work out well if everything goes well. But the reason when you find out you made a bunch of mistakes is when they don't go well, and those cases happen frequently enough where it's worth paying someone to make sure that you're doing this the right way.
Right.
So some interesting thoughts and information there from Michael. At this point, we're going to jump to another portion of our conversation. Michael already gave us an overview of the firm's sports law capabilities and some of the issues that he's seen, but then we also started to discuss how the development program in the U.S. compares with the development programs of international leagues in other countries. And specifically, we're going to discuss, and we did discuss, the development academies that have sprung up in the U.S. and how those have impacted youth soccer development here in this country. So here's part 2.
We have, they're sort of like institutionalized concepts about sports leagues, right? And we're already quite different with like the academy program, for example.
All right, so I'm going to stop you there. Why don't you describe a little bit about that? Because that's a system that exists internationally. But here in the U.S., it's essentially a pipeline from youth soccer all the way up to the highest level in the U.S., right?
Yeah, so the way youth soccer was always run, since I can remember, since I was a youth player, it was you played for your local town team, right? And then there were these things called premier teams, which were like if you're in the state of Connecticut, in any state, a premier team or a club team basically had no borders within that state. You can take the best kids of each age group and put them on one team and play every other club team. And if you made a premier team in your age group, you're essentially playing at the highest level in your state, right? And you go to tournaments and compete against other similar teams from other states. What they did now was, I think partly because the appetite to play soccer has grown and it's become more competitive, they established a more elite league. And with MLS teams developing their own youth academies, which is an MLS team now has an academy for young players within a geographic border that's been assigned to them essentially by MLS that they can scout players from. This most elite league is called the Development Academy League, and the MLS youth academies, and then there's a select group of other clubs that aren't necessarily under the umbrella, don't wear the badge and the uniform of an MLS club.
Right.
All compete at that level.
Okay.
But if you play for an MLS academy team and you've played in their youth program, and you're 12 or 13 or 14, at a certain point it's fully funded. I don't know if all programs fully fund, all clubs fully fund their youth academies from start to finish, but I think once you get to a certain level, it's fully funded, and there's a commitment expectation, right? Most of those, I'd say all those kids don't play high school ball anymore. This is what they do full time, right? And if you're good enough, once you get to like senior year of high school, and you're still playing for the club, your choices are typically you either go to college and play in college, but if you're the best player in your club and the club feels like you're someone who can contribute fairly soon, the club can sign you directly into their senior roster, their MLS team roster of 30 or so players. that competes week in and week out in Major League Soccer.
Okay.
So effectively what they've done is said, this is your territory to scout and develop players, and if you do a good job, you're gonna be able to sign these kids right up into your team. You're not going to have to go out into the market and buy players or try to get players through the draft. And then if you develop a player and he becomes, he's ready to leave the program and go to college, and he decides to go play in college, and he continues to play, obviously most teams watch the players that have been through their program because they can still sign that player back into their program without losing him to the draft.
Okay.
Right.
That's that homegrown player mechanism.
Yeah. So if you sign directly into the program without going to college, or they let you go to college and you choose to go to college, and then they sign you out of college, whether you played 2 years or you played all 4 years, they can sign you without letting all the other teams try to pick you. That you're a homegrown player. Yeah.
Okay. So your rights stay with the team that you've come up with.
Correct.
And you've got the opportunity to still play college soccer.
And it's common. You see kids who've gone into college and then, they sign with the team that they trained with before college.
This concludes the first episode of With Legal and Business Insights. Thank you for tuning in, and a special thanks to Michael Rueda for joining me today and providing his thoughts and insight. Remember, you can find links to our website in the show notes, as well as links to provide feedback on this episode and to contact both Michael and me. Next time, I'll be joined by Vasi Ionolis, another Withers partner, to talk about inbound investments in the U.S. real estate market. I'm Joe Morales, and you'll hear me next time on With Legal and Business Insights. Thanks for listening.